I was an atheist, a staunch skeptic, an investigative journalist for the Chicago Tribune. To me, truth was that which could be measured, verified, proven. But everything began to change when my wife, Leslie, gave me some unexpected news. She had become a Christian. At first, I was annoyed. I didn't want a new Leslie. I thought faith would take her away from reality, make her someone different. But the changes I saw in her were undeniably good. She was more loving, more balanced, more peaceful. My journalistic curiosity kicked in. I decided to investigate. I used the same methods I applied in criminal cases. And I defined my target, the resurrection. Because if I could prove that Jesus did not rise from the dead, then all of Christianity would crumble like a house of cards. As I said at the time, if I could disprove the resurrection, Christianity would fall like a house of cards. The resurrection is the heart of the Christian faith. The Apostle Paul wrote, "If Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile." In Corinthians 15, I understood that if the resurrection was a myth, then Christianity was a lie. So I formulated 4 fundamental questions for the investigation. Did Jesus really die on the cross? Was the tomb really empty? Did people really see Jesus alive after death? Is all this historical fact or a myth created later? And it was with these questions that I delved deep into the investigation. I started with death. If Jesus did not die, then he could not have been resurrected. I interviewed forensic doctors, historians, crucifixion experts, and I listened to detailed medical accounts. The conclusion was unanimous. The death of Jesus on the cross is a solid historical fact. One of the details that caught my attention was the spear in Jesus' side. The account mentions the flow of blood and water description that matches what happens in a body that dies from asphyxiation and cardiac failure. I've looked at the swoon theory, the idea that Jesus simply lost consciousness and then came around, but it doesn't hold water. A man who was beaten, crucified, and had a spear in his side wouldn't walk around 3 days later, convincing others that he had conquered death. Conclusion: Jesus really died. Without a doubt. But an empty tomb alone is not enough. The most powerful question came next. Was Jesus seen alive? The response was overwhelming. Documented testimonies showed that Jesus appeared, Mary Magdalene, to the disciples, to 2 men on the road to Emmaus, to more than 500 people at once. According to Paul in 1 Corinthians 15, and these were not fleeting visions. He ate, he spoke, he played. Some said they were collective hallucinations, but as a journalist, this didn't make sense. People don't have identical hallucinations in groups, in different places, on different days. Furthermore, the disciples went from being fearful in hiding, to being men willing to die for this truth. Something extraordinary transformed them, and it wasn't a lie. But could all this be just a legend? A myth created over time? I investigated the reliability of the Gospels. I discovered that the accounts were written too early to be legend. That there are thousands of ancient manuscripts that corroborate the text. That archaeology has confirmed several historical details of the Gospels. If this were a myth, it would have taken generations to develop. But early Christians were already proclaiming the resurrection within weeks of the events. There was no time to become a legend. It was living memory. After months and months of research, interviews, reading, and analysis, I found myself cornered by the evidence. Logic led me to an uncomfortable conclusion. Jesus really died and rose again. And that meant he was who he said he was, the Son of God. The problem was not lack of evidence. The problem was my pride. Because if Jesus was alive, then he had authority over my life. And I had to make a decision. On November 8, 1981, I got on my knees, confessed my faith, and gave my life to Jesus. It wasn't out of emotion, it was out of conviction. My life has changed. My marriage has been restored. My children grew up in a different home, and my career took another direction. Today, I write, speak, and teach about what I once tried to refute. It took me 2 years to come to this conclusion, but today I would say it was worth every minute. The Christian faith is not a leap in the dark. It is a rational response to the evidence. And that evidence changed everything for me. Over the years, many people have come to me with the same questions I asked in the beginning. What about science, and the other gods, and the contradictions? And I understand those doubts because I had them too. But what I have learned is that true Christianity is not afraid of sincere questions. I discovered that faith and reason are not enemies. On the contrary, the Christian faith is built on solid historical, deep philosophical and coherent scientific foundations. It's not about erasing the reason to believe. It's about allowing reason to take us where the evidence points. And they point to an empty tomb for royal appearances, for a transformation that began 2,000 years ago and continues today. If you've made it this far, I have one request. Investigate for yourself. Don't accept or reject Christianity based on superficial opinions, memes, or stereotypes. Go to the source. Ask, read, question. Because if Jesus really did rise from the dead, as the evidence shows, then that is the most important news you will ever hear. I was not a religious man. I wasn't looking for God, but the truth knocked on my door. And today, decades later, I can say, this decision changed everything. Christianity is not only true, it is beautiful. He brings forgiveness, purpose, and peace. And the same Jesus who conquered death can transform your life too. Truth bears the weight of sincere investigation. The only question is, are you willing to pursue it? After my conversion, I realized that the resurrection of Jesus is not just a historical fact. It is the answer we all seek to the great questions of existence. What is the meaning of life? Is there justice beyond this life? Is there hope in the face of death? The resurrection is not just a doctrine, it is a powerful statement. Death is not the end. Evil does not win. And suffering is not in vain. Jesus conquered death, and if he won, then there is hope for me, for you, for the world. The cross showed God's love. The resurrection proved his power. And together, cross and resurrection tell us, you are deeply loved. You were created with purpose. And you can have new life. This is not empty religion. This is living reality. And that truth, more than any argument, is what changed my life forever. After 2 years of investigation, internal confrontations, interviews, readings, notes, I came to a conclusion I never imagined. Jesus really is risen. And that changes everything. I'm not here to convince you with cheap emotions. I'm here as a former atheist, an investigative journalist, who went where the evidence led, and found the truth. I understand the doubt. I understand the skepticism. But what do you do with the evidence? What do you do with the cross and the empty tomb? I chose to bend my knees. And that was the most rational and transformative decision of my life. Now, it's your turn. Are you going to continue ignoring the most important question in history? Or will you have the courage to really investigate? The resurrection of Jesus is more than an event of the past. It's a personal invitation, here and now. God is not afraid of your questions. But the real question is, do you have the courage to follow the evidence to where it really leads? Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. Jesus, Matthew 7:7. There are many myths and misconceptions about what resurrection means. Some say it was just a symbol, a metaphor for hope. Others say Jesus never died, he just fainted. But the evidence leaves no room for such fragile interpretations. The empty tomb, the witnesses, the ancient documents all point to a real, physical, life-changing event. And that is what differentiates Christianity from other religions and philosophies. Many people think that science and faith are incompatible. I used to think so myself. But when I invested time to understand, I realized that science can explain the how of things, but not the why. Does the resurrection defy natural laws? Yes, but science recognizes its own limits, and history cannot be denied, just because something is extraordinary. It is fair to accept the resurrection as a real miracle, as it is the only event capable of explaining the facts in a complete and coherent way. Before Jesus was resurrected, his disciples were afraid and discouraged. Afterwards, they faced persecution, imprisonment, and even death with unwavering courage. Why would they risk everything for something they knew was a lie? Their transformation only makes sense if they actually saw Jesus alive. This radical change is one of the most compelling pieces of evidence I have investigated. For a journalist, testimony is everything. I was struck by how the resurrection accounts came from so many different sources in so many different contexts, and how the early Christians paid dearly for maintaining the truth. Furthermore, the Gospels were written quickly and maintained rigorously. There was no time for myths to form before the first sermons. This speed is proof of the veracity of the reports. The resurrection did not just change the lives of the first disciples, she changed the course of history. The Christian faith spread rapidly throughout the world, confronting diverse empires and cultures. Today, billions of people live by this truth. The resurrection is the driving force that has sustained generations, peaceful revolutions, works of charity and justice, and this force lives on. The fundamental question is, what does the resurrection mean to you? To me, it means that my life has purpose, that suffering is not in vain, that death is not the end, that there is a sure hope for the future. This is the message that no human philosophy or science can give with certainty. If Jesus was resurrected, then he has authority over everything, about life, death, time, morality. This changes everything for me. I can no longer live as if I own my life. I have to submit my choices and values to that authority. And that, I confess, was one of the biggest challenges for me. And it continues to be a daily process. Faith is not simply believing without evidence. It's the decision to trust what the evidence says even when we don't understand everything. Reason led me to the door of faith, but faith made me go through that door. And this is a personal experience that goes beyond evidence, although I never reject it. What really convinces are not just facts and documents. It is seeing lives transformed by the resurrection. My wife Leslie, myself, thousands of people around the world. This transformation is the side effect of the resurrection, a visible sign that something extraordinary has happened and continues to happen. You may be listening to me and still have questions. That's okay. I've had a lot to do. But the resurrection is an open invitation. No matter where you are today, she calls you to experience a new life, to leave the past behind, to live with hope, courage, and love. I'm not going to ask you to accept everything I say now, but I invite you to investigate sincerely, to seek answers and not settle for easy explanations. The resurrection is the most important news in human history. It can transform your life, like it transformed mine. Are you willing to take that step? If you want to start this journey, here's what I suggest. Read the Gospels. Talk to people who live this faith. Ask questions. Pray, even if you doubt, asking God to reveal himself. You are not alone in this quest, and the truth is willing to show itself to those who seek it sincerely. Thank you for taking the time to hear my story. No matter what your decision, I wish you find the peace and truth you seek. The resurrection is a story that changed my life and continues to change lives around the world. I hope it can transform yours too. Jesus lives, and that's the beginning of it all.